Hey, welcome to 14.1 day 1. Today we're just going to define some key vocab. You actually have these notes on Canvas so you can follow along if you'd like, but I'm just going to go through and define 6 vocab words, and 3 of which should already be review. So starting out with mean, this is hopefully a review. Mean is just the average. I'm going to add up all the values and then just divide by the number of values total. So we've found mean before. I will show you how to calculate the mean in the calculator for 2 different data sets. Median is just the middle value, so make sure they're all in order, and then if you have an odd number of points, the median will be the number exactly in the middle. If you have an even number of points, there'll be 2 values in the middle, and you'll just find the average or the mean of those 2 values. Okay, and next is mode. Mode is most often, so just the point that appears most often. You can have more than one mode, or if there's no data points that repeat, then there is no mode. So we'll talk about that here in just a minute as well. All right, next we're going to talk about some words that may not be familiar. So range is the difference between the largest and smallest. It just basically means find your max and find your min and subtract those 2 numbers. So range is very easy to find as long as your data points are in order. Interquartile range is a little bit different. Interquartile range is going to be taking your data, so you have all your data points, and you're going to split it in half. That's going to be your median. And you're going to take and split the first section in half and find the median of that. That's going to be your Q3. And then split the other guy in half and find the middle of him as well. That's going to be your Q1. Your first quartile, the middle of the lower half of the data. Your third quartile, the middle of the upper half of the data. Now the interquartile range is take this number and subtract them and see how far apart those 2 numbers are. And I'll show you how to do that for 2 different data sets. One that has an even number of items and one that has an odd number of items. But interquartile, it's between those 2 quartiles, the first quartile and the third quartile, the range between those 2 quartiles. All right, and last word. Unfortunately, because we don't have calculators at home, it's going to be hard to actually calculate standard deviation, but I'll talk about standard deviation here in just a minute. But basically, the short version is standard deviation is how spread out the data is, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do an example showing you how to find these 6 things using a data set. Okay, so the question here says Jessica found the heights of some of her classmates. The results are shown in the table. Find all these things. All right, so we have a set of data here that has 10 points, so it has an even number of data points. So I'm going to show you how to find these 6 things using those 10 data points. All right, so I went ahead and took those 10 data points that were in the table, and I lined them up in order from least to greatest. So whatever data set you get, you're going to need to arrange from least to greatest, and we're just going to go ahead and calculate each of the things. All right, so to find mean, or the average, you're going to add them all up and divide by the number of items. I'm going to show you at the very end how to get all these things in the calculator, but obviously you don't have a calculator at home. So in the calculator, it's called X bar. So I'm going to show you how to find that. But for now, all we have is the ability to do it on our cell phone or maybe a small calculator. All right, so to find the mean or the average, you're going to add up all the items and divide by the number of items there are. So in my calculator, I went ahead and I typed in adding up all the things. So plus 70, blah, blah, blah. Press enter. I'm going to divide by the number of items I have, which is 10. My average is 62.8. So my average is 62.8. All right, you should have all found mean before. That should be nothing new. All right, median. To find the median, I'm going to have them all in order. I know there are 10 terms, so I should have 5 on each side, but you can also just do the counting thing where you count up 1, 2, 3, count down 1, 2, 3, count up another 1, 2, count down another 1, 2. Whatever you got to do to find that middle value, but there are 5 data sets on this side and 5 data set points on that side. So the middle is actually in between those 2 things. So to find the median when you have an even number of data points is just take these 2 middle numbers, add them together, and divide by 2. Okay, hopefully you also just know looking at it, the number directly in the middle of these 2 things is 61.5, but I'll go ahead and say 61 plus 62. The average of those 2 numbers is 61.5. So the median of this data set is 61.5. All right. The mode is not something you can actually find in the calculator. Also, I missed that. In the calculator it says median, and I'll show you how to find that. The calculator will not tell you the mode, but you just have to look with your eyeballs and see which number appears most often. So there's 1, 1, 1. Oh, there's 2 of these guys. 1, 1. Okay. So there's only one number that appears most often. So my mode is 61. All right. The range is the max x value minus the minimum x value. And I'll show you how to find that in the calculator as well. But literally just take your biggest number minus your smallest number. So 70 minus 57, my range is 13. Okay, and then interquartile range, I'm going to show you how to calculate that. You've got to find Q3 and you've got to find Q1. So to do this, it depends on if you have an even number of data points or an odd number of data points. So here I have 10 points. So my median was right there in the middle. It was 61.5. Well, to find Q1, or the middle of my lower data points, I'm just going to cut off right here, and 61 is in this group. So I'm going to find the middle of this group here. Well, there's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 data points. So if I count up 1, 2, and count down 1, 2, the middle is actually going to be 60. So Q1 is 60. Do the same thing on the other side. So my median was 61.5 here, but 62 is included in this upper set here. So count up 1, 2, count down 1, 2. My middle is 67. So Q3 is 67. So the middle of my upper half is 67. The middle of my lower half is 60. The difference between those two numbers is just Q3 minus Q1, my interquartile range. Also, we usually just short this and say IQR, and you'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow when you do outliers and stuff. But 67 minus 60 is just 7. My interquartile range is just 7. All right, standard deviation is actually not able to be calculated by hand. Well, you can if you want to have a master's in math or something. But you're not going to do this by hand. It is just a very difficult process. It can only be done on the calculator. So I'm going to quickly show you how to do all this in the calculator. I'm going to go put my data points in and I'll show you how to do it. All right, so I know most of you guys don't have calculators, so I'm just going to do this pretty quickly. So to calculate standard deviation, which you will not be asked for on the homework or Delta Math, you're going to go to Stat, you're going to go to Edit, you're going to type in all your data points. So I went ahead and typed them all in, except for the last one. I'm going to go ahead and type in 70, press Enter. I'm going to press Stat again, and I'm going to go over to Calc and just press Enter. I just want to show you, just because we will eventually have a calculator app that works for you guys. Right now it's not working, but you will be able to do this sort of thing online. So let's go ahead and look what we got. So the X bar, here we go. X bar is your mean, 62.8. We already calculated that. Median. To find the median, you've got to scroll all the way down. And down here, you're going to talk about box and whisker plots tomorrow. It gives you your lowest value, your highest value, your median, Q1 and Q3. You can calculate all this without the calculator, but obviously I just typed in my data points and did it in 1 second, but it didn't take very long on our own either. Minimum value 57, max 70. So the range is 70 minus 57, and we found that. So we found 13. The median, we lined it up, but the median 61.5. We already calculated that guy there as well. And then the interquartile range is Q1 and Q3. Find the difference. We did that by hand, and we found interquartile range of 7. So you can do all this by hand except for standard deviation, and that's going to be this SX here in the calculator, so it's 4.34. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in. And that literally just tells me how spread out my data is. So I'm going to do an example here in just a minute, talking about how that changes, but for now, just know that my data is not terribly spread out. I'm only ranging from 57 to 70, so it's not a very large data set. So my standard deviation, my SX here, is a pretty low number. All right, so for our second example, I went ahead and made up some data points that just had an odd number of data points, so you can see how the median and Q1 and Q3 behave a little differently. All right, so if you're given a data set that's not in order, go ahead and put in order. I just made these up in order, obviously, so I wouldn't have to redo it. Okay, So to find our mean, we are going to go ahead and type in all of these data points and just add them up. So I'll just do that right below the screen. 7 plus 11 plus 25 plus 25 plus 36 plus 41 plus 98 plus 98 plus 150. Press enter, and there are how many data points? So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 data points. So I'm going to divide by 9. I'm going to get 54.5 repeating. So I'm just going to go ahead and write 54.5 repeating. That was my average for those 9 data points. All right, median. I'll go ahead and change colors here. Median, I need to find the middle. So I told you there's 9 data points, so halfway between 9 is obviously like 4.5, but I'm just going to count up rather, 1, 2, 3, 4, count down 1, 2, 3, 4. The middle number is 36. So my median is just 36. There's no need to worry about finding the average for those things there. Okay, then I want to go ahead and find my mode. Mode is just the number that appears most often. So I can see that 25 appears twice, and so does 98. And it's totally okay to have 2 modes or 3 modes or no mode. You can have a couple different answers there. All right, the range is just the maximum value minus the minimum value. So 150 minus 7 is 143. All right, and then the one we actually got to do some work. So finding Q3 and finding Q1. All right, so to do those, you're just going to split your data in half. Okay. So so now I have 4 data points here. So my median is 36. He's just kind of thrown out. So now I have 4 here. So I'm going to count up 1, 2, count down 1, 2. Oh, my middle is actually directly in the middle of those 2 numbers. So you would find the average, which hopefully you can see is already 98. I'm going to go ahead and do it. 98 plus 98 divide by 2. I do not need to do the math on that. I know it's going to be 98. So my Q3 is 98. Okay, to find Q1, I'm going to find the middle of my lower half of my data. So ignoring a 36, I'm going to count up 1, 2, count down 1, 2. Oh, my average is right there in the middle. That one's not as obvious without doing the math. So I'm going to say 11 plus 25, divide by 2. That is 18. So Q1 is 18. Okay, to find my inner quartile range, I'm just going to go ahead and do 98 minus 18. So that's going to be 70, 80. That's going to be 80. Okay, and then to go ahead and find my standard deviation, I'm going to go over here to the calculator. I've actually already put my data points in, so there they are. And then I'm just going to press stat, go over to calc, press 1 var stats, boom, 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 press enter. And I have all my answers here, except I need to find, so there's my Q1 18, Q3 is 98. I need to go find standard deviation, which is right here. So it's 49.14, which just means that this data is very spread out. That's a pretty big number. Our last one was 4 point something. So 49 means my data is very spread out. 7 to 150 is pretty spread out data. You will again not calculate by hand, but just know a bigger number means more spread out data. Smaller number means closer together. All right, very last example here. I have 2 dot plots with data that's obviously spread out in 2 different ways. The question I could ask is which one has a higher standard deviation? And again, standard deviation just means how spread out is your data. So the question I'm essentially asking is of these 2 data sets, which one is more spread out? And you can just visually see, even though it doesn't have a lot of stuff together, it goes from here to here. This data is more spread out, therefore has a higher standard deviation than this data, which is sort of clustered in the middle, and here's its low, here's its high. So higher standard deviation, more spread out data, lower standard deviation, less spread out or closer together data. All right, those are your vocab words. Tomorrow you'll use interquartile range and Q1 and Q3 and all that jazz while talking about box and whisker plots and things like that. So good luck.